We're going to pick up where we left off on this homework assignment 6 and getting to know Excel here. So we just talked about selecting groups of cells. What we want to do now is look at some additional features here. So if we want to rename the worksheet, for instance, we said that by default they're usually named Sheet 1, Sheet 2, Sheet 3. We can rename this as Homework 6 per se. We can also save the workbook. So we would go to File, Save As, and this looks like any other program, but we want to pay attention to the file types down here. So the default is this .xlsx file, or Excel workbook. There's also a macro enabled workbook, which is what we'll be using when we start talking about Visual Basic for Applications, which is a programming language. And then there is a historic format, XLS, which is the file type that was used prior to the 2003 versions here. So I'm going to use the default here, and let's save this as Homework 6 Fall 15 Solutions. Alright. The next big obstacle in understanding how to take advantage of Excel is understanding cell references. So we talked about the notations of cells here, and a particular cell is referred to by its column and its row. You can see the cell names up here in this name box. So for instance, I'm currently in D32. We looked at a basic function, and we want to look at that in a little more detail. So what I'll do is I'll scroll up and I'm going to copy this area table, and to do that I can select it by holding down the left mouse button, and I'm going to right click and click on copy, scroll down, and I want to paste it in cell A41. So right click, paste. So now I have my area table down here. What I want to do is look at trying to compute the area, which is just the length times the width. So to do this, I'm going to take advantage of cell referencing. So I'm going to use a formula that looks like equals. I'll click on the cell instead of having to type it in. So B42 times my width, which is in A43. So let's look a little bit closer at this formula. So you can see the formula has a function because it starts with the equal sign, and it's referencing B42, so you'll see that's a blue boxed cell times A43. So it makes it very visually appealing and easy to see what's going on here. But if I were to copy this formula, so right click, copy, right click, paste, and I were to do this a couple times, so I'm going to use the shortcut on the keyboard, so Control C to copy, and then I'm going to paste it in the entire table. The value for a length of 7 and a width of 7 should be 49, but what happens here is that by default we're using relative references. So this is the default in Excel, and those look like A2, for instance. So we just referred to the column and the row, so this is a relative reference. The problem is when we copy relative references, they are going to copy the formula such that the new formula has the same references in relation to where it was before. So it's easier to look at this graphically. So if we look at B42, it's not really a cell B42. You can interpret this as the cell one above where we had the formula. Same thing with A43. It's not really referencing A43, it's referencing the relative position of A43, which is one to the left. So if we come down here to this particular cell, since we copied it and the default is a relative reference, it's going to maintain that relative reference. So it's still referring to the cell above times the cell to the left. This is not exactly what we want, so we need to look at a couple other types of references. The next being a mixed reference. So for instance, we can lock a row, and to do that you're going to place the $ in front of the row, so $2. that would maintain row 2 even when you copy the formula. If we wanted to lock the column, that would look like $A2. So the $sign indicates to Excel that we're holding either the row or the column fixed. And then finally, if we want to lock them both, it's referred to as an absolute reference. And this locks rows and columns. And so that reference would look like $A, $2. So we can fix this table. We always want to refer to the lengths that are in row 42, and we always want to refer to the widths that are in column A. So to do this, let's select the entire table and delete it and restart. So our formula is going to look like the function equals my length, and what I want to do is lock the row, and instead of having to type the $sign, we can use the F4 key to cycle between absolute, locking the row, locking the column, and going back to relative. So what I want to do is lock the row, so I'm going to use F4 until the $sign appears in front of the 42, and then times my width. So now I'm going to use F4 until I get to the $sign in front of the A alone. Now when I copy this formula, so Control C and select Control V, it maintains row 42 and column A, and I get the appropriate values for my area table. So next part, we will look at some common functions and then look at applying our references and start charting some things.